Clones. You may have heard of them. You may have even seen them compared against one another here on this channel in a series I called Clone Wars. And with each episode, there seemed to be a lot of confusion and misinformation spreading within the community about these characters in the game, as well as in the current one, which will get their own series. Today, we put it all to rest. Well, at least to those that will listen. Misconception number 1. There are no clones. This is simply a clear lack of understanding of the game and what a clone is. Fighting games are no strangers to clone characters, and same goes for Smash Bros. Since the very beginning. Developers save a good deal of time and resources by copying an existing character's moveset and making tweaks from there, instead of creating a completely new character to further fill out the roster. So, what is a clone? A clone is a character with a moveset and physics that are considerably similar to another character's. Often, the clone's moveset will have a few alterations made, and may have their physics altered to a degree as well, while still on the whole having similar and typically have the same special mechanics. Clones are typically similar to such a degree that both characters can be played successfully using a very similar or even identical playstyle, with more differentiation between clones, semi-clones, or even pseudo-clones, making that transition more difficult. Clearly, this does not mean that the characters have to be exact copies to be clones. When characters have no differences, it is simply a palette swap, as is the case for Alf and the Koopalings, and these characters do not have their own spot on the roster, but merely share it with the rest of the other costume changes, as they are merely aesthetic. Misconception number 2. Character 1 and Character 2 aren't clones, or semi-clones. Here we have to make a distinction between clones, semi-clones, and pseudo-clones, although to be clear, they all exist under the same umbrella term, clone characters. And of course, Sakurai had to make this even more muddled with the new term Echo Fighters in Ultimate, but we'll get to that later. Semi-clone is a term used for characters who share some of their moveset with their parent character, with some similarity in physics, but have enough differentiating moves and characteristics that calling them a true clone wouldn't be entirely accurate. Otherwise, they'd simply just be a palette swap and not a character at all. Semi-clone status can differ among players' minds depending on their basis of the term. For example, one basis for dubbing a character a semi-clone would be many differences in their special moves from whichever character they were cloned from. This process of a clone breaking away from its roots and establishing its own identity as it divergently evolves is known in the Smash community as Luigification, named after how Luigi, originally a clone of Mario, but eventually coming into his own in both the Super Mario and Smash Bros. Series. Luigi was a textbook clone of Mario in Super Smash Bros. For the N64, only differing in dash attack, down tilt, and the taunt since it had a hitbox. And in each subsequent installment of the series, including the newest one, he has become less and less like Mario, to the point where it's not even accurate to call him even a semi-clone anymore, but a mere pseudo-clone at most. Pseudo-clone meaning that it would be inaccurate to say that they are not cloned to some degree, along with Wolf and Brawl via Fox. Suffice it to say that they still have their own identity to be considered their own character, and not near close enough to be an Echo Fighter since the skills really can't translate well from one to another. They still share some similarities, of course though. Fireball being the most obvious for Luigi and Mario, although still not identical. Some animations are similar, even if they aren't for the same move, such as Mario's Dare and Luigi's Down Special sharing a similar animation, although with different properties, frame data, damage, and hitboxes. So while none of Luigi's moves are exact copies of Mario's, the reuse of animations and implementations show, like in many of their own games, they are still brothers after all, and are both all around in tennis as well. So as you can see, it's important to know the history of Smash clones to truly understand them. Luigi being the first clone of Mario, and Jigglypuff being the first semi-clone of Kirby. Now not many people know that last part, but yes, You partially have Kirby to thank for Hungrybox being the best melee player in the world, for there would be no Jigglypuff in any Smash game if it weren't for Kirby. And don't you dare speak ill of Kirby. He is our Lord and Savior, and that's canon. You can't argue that. Misconception number 3. Everyone is a clone. There are also those that for some reason often conflate sharing a move or having somewhat similar animations, moves, or tools as making a character a quote-unquote clone. You'll hear this in a myriad of different asinine ways. However, even moves as similar as Bowser's and Charizard's neutral specials, which function both the same, have always had a different startup, active hitboxes, damage, angle, and end lag, with Flamethrower being better in every single discernible way than Fire Breath, I might add. In N64, Captain Falcon even shares his dash attack, floor attacks, down tilt, and down smash with Samus, but is vastly different otherwise and couldn't even be considered a pseudo-clone even back then. Just because two characters punch or use a sword or have a charging neutral special that is a ball and are both Pokemon does not mean that they are clones in any way whatsoever. You'd think this didn't need to be stated, but you'd be surprised. Misconception number 4. Everything with Echo Fighters. So Sakurai didn't do us any favors clearing up online confusion with clones by using the term Echo Fighters, especially by not using the term equally across the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now the name itself is completely fine and a good descriptor of a clone being an Echo. The Japanese term for Echo Fighter is Dash Fighter, using the prime symbol instead of an epsilon. In Japanese, the prime symbol is pronounced dash, hence the term dash fighter. In mathematics, the prime symbol is used to designate that something is derived from something else. Now the term Echo Fighter is used to determine which characters are grouped together on the character select screen when the corresponding menu option is enabled, and also forces such characters to share the same fighter numbers with an appended epsilon. As a result, it only loosely fits into the spectrum of clone terms used by the community to discuss the degree of similarity in the final result. For example, Dr. Mario is a full clone, while Ken is a semi-clone, but Ken is labeled as an Echo Fighter, while Dr. Mario is not. However, Daisy, Richter, and Dark Samus, which have next to no discernible differences from their base fighter, are labeled as such. When the menu option is selected for Echo Fighters to share spaces, the following heroes are denoted as Echo Fighters: Dark Samus, Daisy, Lucina, Chrom, Dark Pit, Ken, and Richter. But this demarcation of similar characters is completely erroneous and misleading. You cannot say that Ken is to Ryu what Dark Samus or Dark Pit are to Samus and Pit. There's just way more differences between those clone pairs. The term is not fully related to how unique a character is, as some clones are not marked as Echo Fighters despite their similar movesets. To further add to the confusion, Smash Ultimate brought back every single character from the past back as well as adding new clones, leading to a huge mess, especially with the Link and Marth clones. You have Toon Link and Young Link both back, which are both clones of Link, but of a different Link than the current one, which has again been updated to represent the newest Link in the series, this one from Breath of the Wild, and given different abilities from the past parent Links of each clone, further separating themselves than they would otherwise due to Link's new bomb, forward smash beam at 0%, loss of claw shot as a grab, and the possible double arrow shot. Toon Link is a semi-clone, while Young Link is a full clone, citing 11 unique attacks from Link instead of Young Link's 6, and also has a completely different model as well. And things get even less clear with what an Echo Fighter, clone, or even semi-clone is with the inclusion of Chrom, whom is a full clone of a semi-clone to a character whom also has their own full clone, and also takes their up special from a completely different unique character from the roster. It's an absolute mess. And then there's Simon and Richter, which is their own story. Characters that were made alongside each other, taking inspiration from each other's home series abilities, effectively, as Sakurai puts it, echoing each other. This is unlike Marth and Roy from Melee, by the way, another misconception, because Roy was simply made to be a clone of Marth. Simon and Richter take each other's moves and both use them identically in every single way, other than the elemental properties of their down special. Essentially, they took two characters' canon abilities from their own video games to create one fighter, but made them both playable anyway, adding the tiniest difference ever to not make them mere palette swaps. From Smash 4 to Ultimate, there was of course still some Luigification amongst some clones, including Luigi, of course, as well as Ganondorf, both significantly decloning parts of their movesets. Let's make no mistake, however, the only ever clone in the history of the series to completely rid itself of being a clone and becoming its own unique character is Jigglypuff from the transition of N64 to Melee. The term Echo Fighter does not have a definition or any parameters that a character must clear in order to be qualified or disqualified. The term Echo Fighter is used merely to refer to certain clones based on development time and therefore cannot be used as a synonym or replacement for the term clone. All Echo Fighters are clones, but not all clones are Echo Fighters. It's a weird subset that is honestly just frivolous and means next to nothing for all intensive purposes. Misconception number 5. X character is a waste of a character slot. This is by far the most egregious and stupidest thing you'll ever hear about a clone character in a video game. People who believe this cannot be taken seriously and should be mocked, ridiculed, and ignored. People under this delusion seem to be completely unaware of how video games work, how game development works, how data works, how consoles work, and probably how to tie their shoes as well. There is no such thing, and I repeat, no such thing as a character slot, as if it's something that needs to be filled by something. Taking Luigi out of the N64 roster does not replace him with someone else. It doesn't magically make another brand new character appear. This is the N64 roster. Now here is what it would look like if there were no clones. This is the Melee roster. This is the Melee roster if there were no clones. This is the Ultimate roster. You see where I'm going with this? Clones exist in fighting games because it is significantly less expensive in time and resources to develop a character using another character as a base than it is to do everything from scratch. It fills out the roster, appeals to the fans of that character, and it doesn't cost as much as a unique character. Lucas in Brawl didn't take up a slot from what otherwise would have been given to Ridley or Gino or Knuckles or Shrek. Without Lucas in Brawl, the roster just becomes smaller by one. Chrom didn't take a slot from Shovel Knight or Shantae. There was no such thing as slots, as if the game has to have a certain amount of characters. And obviously, for the past 2 Smash games now, we've gotten DLC characters. DLC, as in downloadable content. Nintendo could make the roster any size they want. There are no memory restrictions. We're downloading additional content that doesn't exist on the disc. And almost every game of the past 15 years hasn't even used up the entirety of the space a disc or chip provides. That's just how video games work. Clone characters have only done good for a game. They aren't lazy. If they wanted to make Ganondorf a completely different character from Captain Falcon, then Ganondorf wouldn't even exist in Melee at all. You either would have gotten a clone of Falcon, or the roster is one character less because Ganondorf wouldn't be there and possibly not even in some future games. Maybe Ganondorf doesn't come into the roster until Smash 4. Who's to say? Maybe he comes out in Brawl and he's even worse than what he actually was. Who's to say? But if you wanted Dr. Mario to be completely different from Mario or not have him at all, then there would be no Dr. Mario. Ever. That's just how it works. So these are the most common misconceptions about clones throughout the series of Smash Bros. If you enjoyed the video, there's some buttons down below to let me know. If you want to know more about the differences between clones in Ultimate, then subscribe and stay tuned for a continuation of my Clone Wars series. Cause Echo Fighter Wars just doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. Sorry, Sakurai.